All right, my friends. So this is going to be, I know this is called the weekly Gemara Shir, and I try my best to keep to the weekly. This will be our final Gemara Shir for the next few weeks. I will try to get back to our schedule as soon as possible, but have an anticipated busy schedule coming up. So we will, God willing, get to the top of Lamed Daled Amid Beis of 34b tonight. We're starting on 34a, by the way, Lamed Daled Amid Aleph. And it's great because right at the top of where we'll end tonight, God willing, is a new Mishnah. So hopefully, fast forwarding a few weeks in the future, when we pick up our regular regimen, we will start fresh with a new Mishnah, and that should hopefully make things a smooth transition. All right, so our Gemara is basically going to talk about two things this evening. One is the contrast of a tzaftzfa with an arava. A tzaftzfa, the Gemara will actually describe for us in a little detail, but it's basically not the same as an arava. Just one characteristic that's different, and we'll talk about other characteristics, is that a willow's leaf is, let's say, it's long, like a river, and a tzaftzfa is more stubby and round. And we'll talk about two others as well. So an arava, as you may have gathered, an arava is one of the daled minim of the lulav. And a tzaftzfa, well, chances are you do not see a tzaftzfa when you come to a good Hashem to get your daled minim. And, well, if you did, certainly let me know, because they are not kosher, arguably, though we will discuss that as well. And then the last part of what we'll cover this evening is just it comes up as a tangent, but very interesting, about names of different important things that have halachic ramifications that got swapped after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, each of them having ramifications for its own distinct area of halacha. And I know that sounds a little bit vague, but we'll see what I'm talking about soon. So we find ourselves at Tanu Rabbanan. It should still be the first page in the art scroll. Tanu Rabbanan Arve Nachal. In the text of the Gemara, it is 5 lines down from the top. Should be a new section. All right, so the following brisa, Tanu Rabbanan Arve Nachal Hagedilos Al Hanachal. So the pasuk. So again, when we looked at the pasuk doesn't tell us take a lulav, esrog, hadas, and a rava. That'd be too easy if God actually told us explicitly what to take, right? So we have to figure, otherwise we wouldn't have all this Gemara to learn, and that wouldn't be so much fun. So what exactly is that? What is this arve nachal? This certain kind of willow that grows at the river. So it's something that grows at the river, to the exclusion of prat letzaftzfa hagedila bein haharim, to the exclusion of tzaftzfa that generally grows in the mountainous regions. Rabbi Zera, and what is the scriptural proof for this? Ma'ikra kach al ma'im rabim tzaftzfa samo. So God is basically telling the Jewish people that I give you the opportunity to be like an arava, and instead you place yourselves to be like a tzaftzfa. And which is kind of funny, because we are probably familiar with, we've probably heard this in one too many rabbi drushos about how, the Arba Minim resemble 4 different kinds of Jews, blah, 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 blah. I shouldn't say it's an actual medrash, but it gets a little bit trite. So the Arava, we usually think is doesn't have good flavor or good taste. And that's the Jew who doesn't have Torah or Masin Tovim. Yet, apparently you could still be worse off than the Arava, which is the Tzavtzava. So God, it's funny. I mean, maybe that comes to show just how bad the Jews were, that God said, at least be like an Arava, but then you want to become like a Tzavtzava. Now, what's so bad about a tzaftzfa? We'll talk about that soon. That has a certain sinister characteristic, which I don't know, maybe it was Paul or someone may have brought this up in a previous year. So Amar Le'abai, maybe we should parse the pasuk as follows: the Dilma Perushi Kamefarish. What is God telling us? Kach al ma'im rabim, take something from the great waters. Umayni, what is this thing that you should take? The Heligat Tzaftzfa. That's what you should be taking. So it sounds like tzaftzava is actually something desirable. Well, in Cain, my sumo. What do you do with the word sumo? It sounds like, and you guys placed yourself. You guys decided to become like a tzaftzava. And so the way to parse it is tzaftzava is no good. Aravos are good. So that is our pasuk for that. Okay. And the Gemara is kind of like, reiterate this a little bit. Amar Yavo, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said, Ani Amar, so this is how you read it. Ani Amar Yisrael Lefanik Kach Almayim Rabim. So I told you to be like something which would be taken from the great waters. Umaynihu Arava, and this refers to the Arava. Whereas they then decided to be like a tzaftzava that is found in the mountains. So that is how one would render the pasuk. And we're going to just reiterate this again. There's just a different version of how this conversation went down. There's some who that the conversation went as follows, that this pasuk was actually applied directly to our Mishnah. So here we go. That's the pasuk. So Maskevla Razera asks, Dilma Perushi Kamefaresh, Kachamayim Rabim, Mainihu, Tzavtzava. Maybe we should read the pasuk as take from the great waters. And what is this thing that you should be taking? The great Tzavtzava. In Cain, my samo. But then what do you do with the words with samo, which sounds like it's a negative? But you decided to be a Tzavtzava and not live up to your potential of being an Arava. And indeed, Amar Rabbi Yevahu, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, same thing again. God said, be like the Arava. But they, the Jewish people, said, nah, we'd rather be like a tzaftzava. At this point, we're probably wondering to ourselves, what is so bad about the tzaftzava already? Big deal. This willow, that willow, a whole bunch of branches anyway. So there is perhaps something a little bit sinister about the tzaftzava. And we're going to find it out right now. Tanar Rabbanan. Esahu arava esu tzaftzava. So how do I identify an arava and how do I identify a tzaftzava? Arava kanashla adom fa'alasha mashach upia chalak. Its stem is red. Its leaves are, kind of elongated, upia chalak, and its perimeter, its edges are smooth. So the arava, even though I guess it's a little pointy right at the end of the leaf, the perimeter of it is smooth. Whereas tzaftzava kanashla laban, its stem is white, but alashla agul, its leaves are round, but you're thinking to yourself, you just look at them. I'm sure there's a whole drasha, by the way, on this. I didn't look it up, but I'm sure there's some Hasidic Torah on it. If you look at the arava, it looks like this really pointy and sinister leaf, but it's actually kind of soft when you touch it. Whereas it's tzaftzava, this big flappy leaf, couldn't hurt anyone. But meanwhile, pia doin lamagal, that if you were to feel it, it's actually kind of like almost serrated around the edges. So it's actually harmful. And they don't invoke the pasuk here, but we should recall Abai and Rava, Abai saying Deracha Darchei Noam. It's not just a nice song we sing when we return the Torah, but it can have even halakhic implications. That Deracha Darchei Noam, the ways of the Torah are pleasant, and God doesn't want us taking serrated leaves and cutting our hands on it. As I said, no slicing, only puncturing, right? Only pointy ends. We're fine with the lulav to pierce. We're fine with the aravos, which have leaves that could pierce. For some reason, we don't like slicing, but we like skewering people. Make of it what you will. Tanya, but it seems to be contradicted by the following brisa. Dome lemagal kasher, dome lemeser puzzle. If it's shaped like a sickle, it is kosher. If it's like a saw, it's puzzle. So wait a minute. I thought we said that if it's like a sickle, it's okay. So Abaye, Kitanya Hipachilpa Gila. This is not referring to tzaftzava. This teaching is referring to a chilpa gila. Now, what's a chilpa gila? So if you look at Rashi, Rashi says a chilpa gila is a min arava ksherahi. It's another kind of arava. It's I don't know what I forgot all the classifications from my 10th grade biology class, but essentially it's a subspecies of arava, upia dum magal, and its edges are like a magal, like a sickle. Avol shara but the rest of arava is smooth. So okay, it didn't make the cut, or did make the cut. Pun intended. There you go. What was funny was when I interviewed Rabbi Feldman yesterday. I asked him, that phrase that Lou Greenberg coined, that if there's a rabbinic will, there's a halachic way. And then he's like, oh, well, we do talk about wills in the book also. And I was like, oh boy, you're like out rabbied me on the puns over here. And then I said, oh, this is like, I said like we should find something interesting to learn together. And then he parsed it in the email. He's like, interesting, because we talked about interest with the heteriska. So he was a riot. All right, going forward. Oh no, sorry, wait. So let's wrap up this section. So Abamar Rabbi Shmamina. Hi Chilpagila Kosher Lashana. So what can I infer from here? That a Chilpagila is kosher to use for the Hoshanis. Pshita, well, that's pretty obvious. It's a statement of the obvious. Well, Mazatim, what would have I thought? Oh, Islay Shem Levail and Iskasher. Kamash Malan. I would think since it has a name appended to it, therefore, right, it has a Shem Levi, it has an accompanying name which describes it. Maybe it's not the same as a standard Arava. Okay, the Gemara says, wait a minute. Maybe it's not kosher. Why are we assuming it's kosher? Because, as we saw last week as well, it says in the pasuk Arvi Nachon plural Amarachmana Mikol Makam, which means that there's got to be within the broad species of Arava, there are subspecies of other kinds of Aravos that are kosher. But I don't know botany well enough, so I just trust the Aravos that come in the Hechsher bag that they sent. All right. Speaking of which, so this brings us to a bit of a transition in the Sukkah. Since we brought up the idea of names, we talked about Aravos versus Tzavtzava. Well, if you're confused, and if I'm confused about what an Arava and what a Tzavtzava is, well, apparently back then it wasn't so clear either. And in fact, their names actually got mixed up after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Arachista. There are three sets of words that their names got mixed up after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Chalafta, Arafta, Arafta, Chalafta. So Chalafta is just another word for Tzavtzava. So Aravos and Tzavtzava, their names got swapped. Lamai Nafkamina, okay, big deal. New names. Well, what are the ramifications? The lulav. Pretty obvious nafkamina over here, whether you have a kosher lulav or not. Because if tzavtzava is not kosher, we want to know what is an actual tzavtzava, what is an actual arava. Okay, that one we knew. Shipura chotzotzrisa shipura. Mixing up a shofar with a trumpet and a trumpet with a shofar. Lamai nafkamina. Without looking, can you guess what are the practical ramifications of what is a shofar versus what is a trumpet? Not a trick question for the mitzvah of fulfilling shofar. Le shofar shall Rosh Hashanah. Okay. You'd have to think, and maybe I should have looked more at the Mefarshimas. You'd have to think there was some like deeper Havamina and Maskana here. Okay. Peturta, Petura, Pesura, Peturta. A big table with a small table with a big table. Okay. What's the difference whether something's called a big table or a small table? Lamai nafkamina, lamekach lamemkar. I was just reading about financial disputes. I was just reading an article in today's Wall Street Journal, actually, about how people nowadays, their first action is to dispute a charge on their credit card sometimes even before trying to clarify things with the merchant that they bought it from. So, like there are cases like where but it's helped people in the past. And sometimes, like, one of the cases was someone ordered a chair for $750, and then it wasn't what was represented on the website, and the merchant refused to refund it. It says no refunds. So he disputed the charge and won. So these are important things in Memkar. We have to know what is a big table? What's a small table for when you say, I want to buy a patura, I want to buy a patorta? Well, we need to know what is what when it comes to the markets. Amar Abai said, Abani Omer, I got another one. Bekasi huvlila bekasi. So coming back to our Fulin cow anatomy, and I know the Sefer Hechana people will appreciate this one. There are 4 chambers of the cow's stomach. It goes in, then it goes to the second chamber, it turns into cud, it goes back up, then it goes back down, and then it goes to the third chamber, and then to the fourth chamber, the maw, and then it's out of there. Quite a process. So, Lamai Nafkamina, this is where it gets a little bit less familiar. So what are the Beis HaKosos? It's literally the house of the cups. Because I think it's because that stomach is a very thick one. And the idea is that, cows are not as careful about what they eat as what we eat. So, they might accidentally chew some grass from the ground. And then what do you know? There's a nail in there. There's something really harmful. So I guess God or nature, however you want to put, or both, the way things developed, where these cows developed the Beis HaKosos, which the way it works is, when you have a treifa, what's a treifa? Generally, the classic example of a treifa is you find a hole in its lungs. But if you find a piercing in some other areas that could kill it also, that's also a problem. It's just that the lungs were mandated to check. So let's say you notice that there is a piercing in the Beis HaKosos. The Beis HaKosos has actually 2 layers that are stuck together with fat in between. So if the needle pierces one side, but it doesn't go through to the other side, that is still considered intact. So that's the nafkamina, because the other stomach, if the needle pierces it, it's pierced, game over. But the Beis HaKosos, only if it goes through and through. So I had this guy named Rabbi Shimon Altshul. So he's teaches at Bar Ilan, does some stuff in Eretz Yisrael, and he was teaching a tshuva of the Chasim Sofer on this topic. And the Chasim Sofer says, even if you find a puncture on one side, chances are it's a puncture on the other side. So he's machmir for this. But he said, actually, because what happened was the shochtim of his town kept finding these punctures, and then they weren't going to have any meat for Yom Tov. And then the worst thing that the Chasim Sofer was concerned about was they were going to take what we call shchutei chutz. They're going to import meat from outside of the town, where he certainly wouldn't be able to give us hashgacha to what's coming from outside of his town, where he doesn't have any authority. So he said, you know what? Just look the other way. Don't look to see if there are needles there or not. Now, generally in halacha, we can't just say don't look, to look the other way. If there's a problem, there's a problem. Well, the answer is because something like the lungs, we are required to check because of the high chance of there being problems of sirchus there. But I think the idea was you're not really obligated to check necessarily every organ of the animal, but it's if you notice that there's an issue, then you got a problem. So maybe just don't look, and then we can azlina basaruba. We can rely on the majority. The statistic majority is that a cow is not going to have a problem of punctures in its stomach, right? Because the issue is with sirchas, which are adhesions. The reason these adhesions are found on animals' organs is because there was a puncture and then things foamed up, and that's how you have an adhesion, apparently. So an adhesion, if you think about it, it's counterintuitive. You would think, oh, an adhesion, that's great. That means things are stuck together and everything's intact. But there's only an adhesion because there was a puncture. So that's the funny thing. So anyway, that's why it's important to know which stomach we're talking about, because it depends. If you find a needle there and it's a piercing, what do we do about it? Amar Bar Yosef, Avani Omer Bechol Borsif, Bavel Borsif, Borsif Bavel. And apparently, they even swapped around the names of Bavel and Borsif and Borsif and Bavel. And Lamai Nafkamina, what's the difference? Legite Nashim. A get needs to be written and has to have the location of where it's being written, and also the river or body of water that's being written nearby. So I think when Ginner done here, they refer to the Long Island Sound on the get. I have to ask Rabbi Jafter. I guess, thank God, it's been a while since he's had to come here. But that's important also. You have to know the location. And this is something that I, in rabbinic WhatsApp groups, not for Gittin, but for Ksubas, where you also have to know the name. Like, that's a pretty frequent question that comes on. Like, I'm doing a wedding in this destination. I'm doing a destination wedding and whatever. How do you spell it on the Ksuba? So it's important. All right, and that brings us to the top of Lamed Dalet Amud Beis of 34b, and as effective immediately, my classes will not be taking place next week, and in Mirza Hashem, just check your emails, and as soon as hopefully I can get my act together, I'm hoping for mid-July, at least to start Gemara again. Maybe I'll transition back in slowly and adding my classes back. But hopefully, I'm hoping, God willing, mid-July we can get back to it. But as of now, just canceled. And yeah, Toby, you're muted.
B'shana tova.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
This includes Mishnah classes? I don't know if you caught my thing on the bulletin that they had you down for 2 Mishnah classes next week, and I said, I wrote back. I said, check that.
I'll ask Rabbi Cohen. I guess if Marissa isn't going to labor before then, and I'm still around, I guess I could do it. But
I have Talia cover for you.
Yeah, I'll have Talia. She likes the cover. That's why I'm here at shul teaching Gemara right now, because she wants to give the shir.
Have a good Shabbos, everybody.
I'll see you guys at Shabbos, God willing. All right, take care. Wonderful learning together, and let's stay in touch, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you much.
Yeah.